Hey there, so I'm back with this video where we are going to take the monthly challenge application further. So what we are going to do is, so far we have database configured with our application, but the database is not being used in the code, right? So our APIs are still pointing to the list. So we are going to have the APIs work with the database, and that is something that we are going to learn how we can do. By the end of this session, you are going to see your challenges being saved, retrieved, updated, deleted. So the entire CRUD operation would be performed with the help of the database, right? Now, this monthly challenge application is going to evolve a lot in the coming videos. So I'm working to bring in the front end for this particular project as well. So you will have a front end which we'll be building using React, and I'm also going to show you how you can deploy this particular application onto AWS. Okay, so something that we are building is going to be live soon, and you will be able to share the URL of the app that you build with the entire world. Okay, so that is going to be some amazing stuff that is coming in. So in order to show your support, I would encourage you all to like, subscribe, and share as much as you can. That's what you can do to support creators like me who are working to bring in such free content for you all. So if you like this particular video, do like, subscribe, and support me in whatever ways you can so that I can bring more such amazing content for you all. So without further ado, let's jump right in. So now that we have configured the database, which is the H2 database over here, okay, as you can see, and if you come back to not the Postman, but here in the browser, you're going to see your entity, or I should say the table over here, which is nothing but the class that is coming in from your project. So given that now we have achieved this, if you take a look at our application, okay, so I'll close this properties for a while. And if you take a look at the services over here, okay, so this is the service. Here we are managing everything that you would see still with the help of list. Okay, so this is not the service. Okay, so this is the service here, right? So we are managing everything right now within the list. So we have this list created, okay, where we are managing the list of challenges. We are saving the challenges in the list. You can see over here, we're saving the challenge here. We are retrieving the challenge from the list itself. So it's time that we move all this logic into the database. How are we going to do this? So we are going to do this with the help of a data access layer, which is going to be a repository. So understand this. Right now we have a controller. Okay, so controller, what is controller doing? It is intercepting the API request. So any API request coming to these endpoints is being intercepted by our controller. Then controller is delegating this to service. What is service doing? Service has all the logic. This is a service layer. And now we need a data access layer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a repository over here. And what is the role of repository? So repository is going to help us communicate to the database. So what it's going to be is, it's not going to be a class, it's going to be an interface, and I'm going to call this as challenge repository. I'm going to keep things really simple, okay? And over here, we have this interface created. Now what I'm going to do is, Spring Boot makes your life a lot easier. So like I said, this is a repository that we are creating. I would like to mention that Spring Boot Data JPA also provides us with two inbuilt repositories, okay, and I would like to show that to you. So I can say CRUD over here. Okay, wait a minute. So let me extend this. So I'm going to say extends, and I'm going to say CRUD repository over here. So you can see over here, if you go into this CRUD repository, this is an interface and it has a lot of pre-built methods. Okay, so this is an inbuilt repository. This is one of them. This is known as CRUD repository. There is also one more which is known as JPA repository. Okay, so this is JPA repository. All right, now what these two repositories do is it comes in with a bunch of CRUD operations. Now, what I mean by CRUD operations, so if you're not familiar with this term, CRUD means create, read, update, and delete. Okay, and what does this do? With the help of this, we get pre-built methods that we can make use of to talk to the database. So let us understand this, people. Whenever you are working with the database, what are you going to do? You're going to create something, right? You're going to read something, you're going to update something, and you're going to delete something. Of course, you're going to have something custom as well, okay? But this is going to be the standard, right? So if you're working on a to-do list app, you're going to create the to-dos, read the to-dos, update the to-dos, and delete the to-dos, right? You're going to perform CRUD, okay? Of course, you would have some custom operations like you are going to fetch to-dos weekly, like in last 7 days or monthly. Those are some custom operations that you're going to do, but this is going to remain the standard. And every application needs this, right? Whether you're building a to-do list application, e-commerce, or any sort of application. So what Spring Boot tells is, I'll give you an inbuilt stuff. Okay, this is inbuilt JPA repository that you can make use of. All right. And you can use it for performing all the standard operations. Okay. And you don't have to provide any sort of extra code. You just have to use this and you are ready to do some basic CRUD operations along with the database that you have configured in your Spring Boot project. Let me show this to you. Okay, so here what I'm going to do is I am going to specify a couple of parameters. Okay, so we need to specify a couple of things over here. Okay, here we need to mention the kind of objects that we are going to work with. So we are going to work with challenge objects, right? And you need to specify the type of the primary key, which is long over here. So if you go to challenge over here, we have long as the ID. Okay, so that is something that we have defined over here, and that is something you need to tell Spring Boot and JPA repository so that it will provide the corresponding methods to you. Okay, now let me show you the magic. We have just done this definition. Okay, we have just written this much of code. We have not written any sort of implementation, anything, and we have just extended interface with JPA repository, which we got inbuilt. Okay. And you can see this is coming in from data JPA. Like if you take a look at the package, you'll notice this coming in from the JPA, data JPA package. Okay. And we have added two parameters here. One is the type of the entity and the type of the primary key of the entity. Okay. And what is the greatest thing? We don't have to write any implementation. Spring Boot or Spring Data JPA will automatically generate the implementation at the runtime, and we can use it to perform the operations. All right, and let me demonstrate this to you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to service over here. Okay, so in service, what do we have? We have a list over here, right? And right now everything is being managed in the list. So we are adding challenges in the list itself. So what we need to do is we need to get rid of this. Okay, and we need to move the logic to the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up over here. Okay, I'm going to need our repository. So I'm going to say challenge repository, and I'm going to say challenge repository over here. Now I'm going to make use of challenge repository here. Okay, so I'm going to say over here, if challenge is not equal to null, okay, challenges.add. So instead of challenges.add, I'm going to say challenge repository dot, I'm going to have access to a few methods. So you can see over here, challenge repository dot gives us access to a lot. You can see over here, it gives us access to find all. So if you want to fetch anything from the database, you have to just say find all. Okay, if you want to filter, you can specify that as well. Okay, so you can see find by ID. So you can specify the ID, unique ID with which you want to filter the data. So I'm going to save over here. We are just saving, right? We are adding challenge to the database. So I'll just say save over here. Okay, this is done and our job is done. So we just replace the method. So instead of referring this to the array list or the list that we have over here, okay, we are just pointing this particular logic now to the repository and we are saving it to the database. Do you want to test it? Let us see this and let us see if we are able to see the challenge being added. Okay, so what I would do is I would come here, or let us switch over to the database first. Okay, we will first confirm that the database is empty. So I'll say select star. So you just need to select challenge table. You'll have the query automatically over here and you need to run this. That's it. Now I'll come over to Postman. Okay, you can see get challenges. Okay, you won't get any challenges. Okay, this is coming in from the list. Okay, we have not changed this particular thing in the Postman, but if we'll go to post data, this is where we create the challenge, right? So I'll say send. Okay, we got an error. So let us switch over to IDE and let us see what issue has happened. So if you see over here, we got a long stack trace. Here's the exception beginning. It says null pointer exception cannot invoke challenge repository.save. Okay, I understood the error. So if you come over here, challenge repository, we have not initialized the challenge repository actually. Okay, so what you can do is you can specify auto wired over here. Okay, so I'm going to say auto wired. I'll save this. All right, let me run this. So probably I'll get one more error over here. Okay, because we don't have a default constructor, but I wish to show this to you. Okay, getting errors is one of the best things. Okay, you get to learn things. So I'll show you right now. So if you run this, you get an error again. Okay, earlier one was because we forgot auto wired annotation, but if you come over here, we got second error. Okay, and let me scroll up. So this worked fine till here, and over here you can see this is the error starting. Okay, so you need a default constructor. Why is default constructor needed? And if you see over here, this is pointing us to our entity class, which means that the challenge class over here. Okay, so this challenge is now an entity. Okay, we are saving it to the database, but it does not have a default constructor and we are getting error for that. And the reason is because we are making use of JPA, and the underlying thing that JPA uses is Hibernate. Okay, and it requires a default constructor to instantiate entities before populating them with data from the database. Okay, and this is one of the errors that you might get if you don't have a default constructor. So right now you're also learning how we are debugging the issues. So whenever you get an issue like this kind of issue over here, internal server error, there's no need to get scared over here. Switch over, take a look at the stack trace. The error messages are really friendly. Okay, and you can debug things easily. You can see this is coming in from Hibernate, like I said. Okay, you can see Hibernate at a lot of places. So what is the solution? It's clearly telling us that it needs a default constructor. There is no default constructor. So we'll come over here. We'll say generate constructor, select none. Done. Restart the application. Hopefully it should work fine. All right. So what I'm going to do is okay, it worked fine. We'll trigger again, and this time you get 200. Okay. All right. So the challenge is created successfully. Now, how do we validate? We'll go to our database. I'll say connect. And here I'll select this entity and I'll see if the challenge is within the database. So you can see indeed we are now interacting with the database. Okay, and what are the changes that we did? Very minimal. Okay, so just to add the database, we did very minimal changes. And now with interacting also, we are making very minimal changes. So we first added a repository. Okay, this is the repository that will help us interact with the database, and you can call it a data access layer. All right, all the logic for talking to the database goes here. Then we have service. Within service, we added the repository. We auto-wired it. And here, we just made change to this line. So instead of adding it to the list, we are now saving it to the database. Okay. Now we need to modify all the methods over here so that all the data we get is from the database. Because if you see our application right now, if you try to get all the challenges, you can see this is coming in from the list, but this is saving to the database. So database has one challenge, but that is not coming in over here. So what do we do is we'll migrate this from list to that of the database. So I'm going to, or we can just comment this part. We'll just comment the list. So we start getting errors everywhere. Okay. And we start removing all the references then to the list. Okay. So what we do is you can see over here, return challenges. we won't say return challenges, but instead we'll make use of repository dot find all. Why find all? Because find all is a method, you can see it helps us getting all the entities from the database. Okay, so whichever app you're working on, if you're working on an e-commerce store and if you have a product repository, you just say find all and you get all the products from the database. Okay, and gone are the days where you have to write complex queries. You just make use of these methods and you get your job done. Now if you come over here, so let us understand how we are going to transition this method from list to that of the repository. So this one is not going to be straightforward because I'll tell you something. We are not fetching the challenge by its ID, but we are fetching it by a custom parameter, or I should say it is a field in the challenge entity. So it's a field in the challenge entity called month. Okay. So like I said earlier, JPA has some predefined methods using which you can fetch the data. Okay, so for example, you can say repository dot, and you can like get by ID, you can get all the challenges and so on. Okay, but if you need something custom, okay, you need to define it. Now the question is, how would you define it? Okay, because you don't want to write queries, right? And we are saying that JPA makes our life easier. So understand this, what JPA will do is it will create a query in the backend or in the hindsight depending on the method name that you specify. Okay, so for example here I want to get the challenge. So I want to get a single challenge by month, right? Because I'm passing in the month, right? And what is month? Month is a field. So what I'm going to tell over here is I'm going to say challenge repository dot find by month. Okay, and I'm going to pass in the string over here. Okay, and what is the string? String over here is month. Okay, so I need this kind of a method where I get challenges by month. Why find? So why are we saying find over here? Because everything, when you talk about repository, everything is by find. So if I say dot find, if you need to fetch anything, it starts by find. That is the convention. Okay, so you can see over here find by ID. If you want to find a specific challenge by ID, you have to use this method and pass in the ID. If you want to find all, you can pass in the sorting order as well. So find is the convention. Okay, you cannot use get over here. Okay, so we are saying find by month. All right, and I also need to ignore the case because this is a string, right? So I'm going to say ignore case. Okay, so we are talking in terms of literally, I would say, code language. Okay, and we are telling the repository, which is nothing but JPA, that hey, we need this entity by month. Okay, you need to ignore the case and you need to make use of this parameter. So you need to find by this. So I'll be passing month and you need to ignore the case and get the object over here. Okay, but the thing is, this is a custom method. It does not exist. So how do we define? We just need to define this in the repository over here, something like this. Okay, and the moment we define this, JPA will take care of the implementation. We don't need to do anything else. It's just that we need to specify like the return type over here. So return type I'll specify is optional over here. I'll say challenge. All right, and we are done, I believe. So if you come over here, okay, so return value is never used, so we need to make use of the return value over here. Now how are we going to make use of return value? So I'm going to say optional, and I'm going to say challenge here, and I'm going to say challenge like so. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this entire for loop, so we don't need for loop over here. Right, earlier we were making use of for loop because like we did not have the database, right? So we were iterating through the list. Now here what I'm going to do is, since we are making use of optional, I'm going to say or else over here. Okay, and I'll pass in null. If challenge is not retrieved, it will return null over here. That is what it means. Okay, otherwise it will return challenge itself. All right, so this is how things will work, and you can imagine how JPA repository will take care of the rest. Okay, so this is something that we'll see in action when we rerun the application. Okay, but now let us come down and let us talk about updating the challenge. So here what we need to do is I will like take this down a little bit, and here I'll first say challenge repository dot, and here I'll get the challenge by ID. Why ID? Because we have access to ID over here. So we have two things over here. One is ID, another is the updated challenge object. So I'll say find by ID like so, and I'll pass in over here updated challenge like so. Okay, and we need to get this optional challenge like so here. All right, so this is done. Okay, it should not be updated challenge here, it should be ID here. We are passing ID. All right, so this is done. And what I need to do is I need to write a if condition. I need to say if challenge is present. Okay, if challenge is present, what are we doing? So we need to update the challenge, right? So I'm going to create a challenge object, challenge to update, okay, is equal to, I'll say challenge dot get. Okay, so this is a challenge that we've fetched from the database, and what I need to do is I'll say challenge to update dot set, let's say set month, and I'll say updated challenge. So we just need to update everything now. Okay, and I guess we have done this down also. Okay, so I'll just copy this here, and instead of challenge to update, I'll just cut this to this. Okay, so we are done. Just be sure you are updating the right object. So challenge to update is supposed to be updated over here. Okay, don't make the mistake of updating this object over here. Okay, this is one of the mistakes that I see devs make, and then when testing the code they are like, okay, why is it not updating? Okay, now we'll say challenge repository, and I'm going to save this. Okay, and we are going to make use of simple save method. And which challenge we are saving? So we are going to save challenge to update like this. All right, we are done. And here, if this is done, we need to return true. Okay, I'll say return true. Okay, and else we need to return false like we were, and we need to get rid of this code. Okay, so I'll just delete this. This is good error. Okay, so this is done. Now what we need to do is we need to modify the delete thing as well. So I'll get rid of this. This is using streams because we were making use of array list. So I'll say challenge repository over here dot. If I type in delete, you can see this delete by ID, delete as well, right? So I can make use of delete by ID, and I can pass in ID over here. Okay, and you can see over here, okay, required type boolean, but this is giving in like the void. Okay, so what we can do is we can add an extra validation here. So what I will do is I'll first find the challenge. Okay, I'll first find the challenge. Okay, then I'll check if the challenge is present. Okay, if the challenge is present, what are we doing? So if the challenge is present, I'm going to delete the challenge like so. So I'll delete the challenge here, and I'll say return true. And then over here, if this does not work, then I'll say return false. So yeah, so a couple of checks, but it looks good now. Okay, so yeah, we have successfully migrated our array list, or I should say the code we have written with the array list to that of the database, right? Let us test this. So I'll just run this application and let us see if we are able to fetch everything from the database. All right, so app is running. I'll come over here. Let's try to get some data. We are not getting any data. Okay, and let me also refresh the database. So I'll connect, and right now there's nothing in the database. All right, if you come here, we create one challenge. If you come here, you can see the challenge being created, and if you come here, if you try to get the challenge, you should see one challenge being returned. Where is this coming from? Of course, the database. Okay, you can even update the challenge. Okay, so you can so let me check the ID. ID was 1. So if you try to update this with February, create a new website, challenge updated successfully, and if you come over here, run this, you can see February, create a new website. Fantastic. You can even delete this, Okay, so I'm trying to delete the challenge with ID 1. Challenge deleted successfully. If you come here, it's deleted. And if you go to get data, you're going to get no challenges. So indeed, this is working fine. We have been able to successfully migrate the changes. So whatever changes we had, we have been able to migrate all those operations to the database. So I hope this was useful. Just to do a quick review over here, okay, I would like to tell you that we have not done a lot of changes to bring in database into action. We have just made use of this repository where we use pre-built JPA repository. We told JPA repository that, hey, we will be working with the challenge entity and the primary key is long. Okay, so primary key is long because we need to get the methods that work with long ID. And what I mean by long ID, so here you can see we got delete by ID. So if you say, wait a minute, so if you say challenge repository dot delete by ID, you can see long ID is the suggestion. And that is because we have specified long as the parameter. So we are telling JPA that, hey, we need everything to work with long as the primary key. And that is what we got. And here with the help of pre-built methods, we made some changes. I won't say a lot of changes. Some changes into the service layer. And everything is working absolutely fine, you can see. And we are now pointing to the database instead of the list over here. And I can safely get rid of this. Okay. So isn't this amazing? I hope this was useful and I hope you understand the power of JPA. To see how things are working internally and to see how queries are being generated internally by JPA, you can do an optional step. You can head over to application.properties over here. Okay. And what I would say is, what you can do is you can say a property over here. You can say Spring JPA.show-SQL and you can add true to this. So what this will do is, this property controls whether SQL statements are logged or not. So in the hindsight, so here we have methods, right? We are making use of methods from the repository. These methods are being translated to queries in the hindsight and they are being used to interact to the database, whichever database you have configured. Okay. So if you want to see what all queries are being generated, you can add this property and you can rerun the application. The moment you rerun the application, okay, let us see. So the application is running. Now if you call any API and if you are interacting with the repository, you can see over here, okay, this query is being printed. So this is a query that is being generated. You can see if I am trying to create the challenge, if I come over here, you can see over here, there is an insert query that is being triggered. Okay. If I'm trying to update, so you can like experiment and see what is happening over here. Okay. So this property helps you with that. So I guess that's about JPA. I hope you all had fun configuring JPA into the monthly challenges API.